Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to At the Table with Tom and Eric, a show about the people who play games. I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer. Well done, Tom. Our guest at the table today is the host of the Board Game Corner review channel, as well as the Dice Tower previews. He's also an avid walker and Lego enthusiast, and I am psyched to delve into his mysterious past. Everybody, please welcome Mark Streed.
Hi. How's it going?
Okay, Eric, you just made up that intro.
I didn't. Well, I mean, I guess I did. I did write it.
I don't think there even is a Board Game Corner review channel anymore.
There's still a YouTube channel, but I don't really. The only thing I posted there within the last year was iArcade. It's a stand-up arcade machine. I did a review for them, but other than that,
you did a review for the arcade thing?
Yeah.
Did you get one
awesome
in exchange for the review?
Well, it gave me a nice discount.
I remember Mark hooking me up with that discount. I want one of those.
I would have done it on the Dice Tower channel. I just didn't think it didn't seem like the right.
Mark, had you got me one, I would have allowed you to do one on the Dice Tower channel.
I love iArcade though. If you want to check them out, it's so cool. I mean, it's an awesome machine. I love it.
What is this? One of these game or game system arcade machines?
And the reason I got it is because I was such a huge Dragon's Lair fan as a kid, and they had a specific Dragon's Lair machine, like a modern day Dragon's Lair stand-up arcade machine. But it's got, tons and tons of games. They're all like, pay to play. You buy it, download it, kind of thing. And you could have multiple machines, and you could have all your games on all the machines and so forth. So I don't have room for a lot of arcade machines. Otherwise, that might be something I would have. But this is nice because I can put a bunch on one machine. So
very
I would
cool.
just want to get one. I'm actually tempted to get the pinball ones that have digital pinballs, cool. Or there's even physical ones where you can switch in and out the stuff.
Yep.
But right now they are out of, normal people's price ranges. The arcade actually is in the price range, but there's two reasons I haven't gotten one. One is I don't know where I'd put it. But secondly is I found that those old games are stinking hard.
Yeah.
They're really hard. You play them, you're like, how did we where's the save feature?
So many quarters. I spent so much of my lawn mowing money playing those machines.
Although some of them, like the classic NES machines, there's the Super Nintendo and the NES Classic, they have this rewind feature that makes some of those games incredibly simple, like Metroid or something, where you'd fall down a hole when you walked in a door. All you have to do is rewind and go, all right, I'm not going that way, instead of backtracking for an hour.
You are messing with the time and fabric of the universe.
Ones, right? You're talking about the little tiny ones, Eric, right?
The minis. Yeah. They're a lot of fun, but they make things. My kids have been playing some things, and they're like, "This is easy." Well, yeah, if you have rewind, that makes it simple.
So simple.
All right, well, before we talk to Mark, just a quick reminder to everybody. We just came back from Dice Tower Retreat, so that was fantastic. And we're thinking about next Dice Tower Retreat, which will be in a year, so there's that. But Dice Tower Cruise, we're about to close tickets for that in just a few weeks, so don't delay if you want to come on that. And Dice Tower West, plenty of room left there. We hope to see you at that. The Autumn Spectacular starts a week from today. And to that note, I think we should say that our next episode is going to be delayed by an extra week. Isn't that what we said, Eric?
Our next episode is going to be after Essen. We're actually delaying an entire month because of travel and all sorts of other preps for the Essen journey. So we will see everybody. I think it's October 17th is our next episode.
Is it? Oh, because that's right, because of coming back from Essen messes things up too.
It really
Blame
does.
me
I mean,
for
the
that
travel
one, folks.
You have to leave early enough to acclimate to the time, and then you can't just leave the night that the show ends. You have to give a couple days of travel for that end too. So it's going to take a little while to get reset.
All right. Well, anyway, now on to Mark. Straight.
We should absolutely focus on Mark. Mark, let's get you located right now. You are in Colorado right now, correct?
I am, correct.
Have you always lived in that area, or did you grow up there?
I did. Fort Collins, Colorado. Though I spent about 3 years in Denver when I was going to school. I went to the Colorado Institute of Art for Photography. So that's the only time I've not lived in Fort Collins. So
Okay, so this leads us directly your photography background. Did that lead to your first career?
it did. So, and while I was at school, leading into other things, is how I got hooked up with the fan club magazine and all the sci-fi things that I've done in the past. So I used them. It was Star Trek: The Official Fan Club and Lucasfilm Fan Club at the time, which we branched into Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, and other things. But I had a photojournalism assignment of how to show something being put together. So I called them up, and at those days, to date myself, they were using like acetate and big boards to lay out the magazine and so forth. So I used them for that, and then from then on out, they asked me to do photos, and that's how I got hooked up with them. So. But yeah, my photography background, I worked for Fan Clubs Inc. I worked for a newspaper. I worked for a couple of local magazines. I shot weddings and things like that, which I did not enjoy. But yeah, lots of photography. I did a lot of advertising photography. When I worked at the newspaper, I did both news and advertising. So news was interesting. A lot of horrific moments in the news. However, one more memorable shooting, I was a semi, it turned on its sideways and was on fire. And so they let me get up on the back of the semi while it's laying on the highway, and I could shoot into the cab while the firemen were dousing it with a hose.
What?
That was pretty fun.
They just let you do that.
They did.
Well, you should have saved the background footage for future videos.
I know, I should have, right? Yeah, I wasn't shooting any video at that time, but
If only you had known. So how long were you a pro photographer?
oh my gosh. So let's see, 87 to 97, 10 years probably.
Wow.
So
when does gaming come into your life? Was this always a childhood love, or is it something you discovered later on?
yeah, oh yeah, since the 70s is the first time I remember gaming. You know, D&D in 79, and we had a local shop called A&A Hobbies, and I would ride my bike and spend all afternoon there, all kinds of things. You know, and like my first board game that I ever purchased with my own money was the Awful Green Things from Outer Space. It was inside the magazine, and so you had to cut out all the chits. It was a Wizard magazine or something like that. I can't remember.
I'm at the point now where if a game requires me to cut out anything,
I know.
we're done. We are done.
If I put stickers on dice or something like that, forget it.
Yeah, but isn't this still your job?
Yeah, it is. I have to do that a lot with the prototype stuff. If it's a game that I buy, though, and I have to do that, I hate it.
So I guess that leads us into your current gig. You currently run the Dice Tower Previews, which is a video production service on the channel that sort of gives an overview of an upcoming crowdfunding campaign. So how does that project usually work? How far in advance are you getting to see these games before a campaign launches?
It varies greatly. We like to see stuff at least a month before, but it can sometimes they'll give me heads up like 3 or 4 months, but a lot of times it's a couple weeks as well before. So it starts to be real crunch time often, because I spend a ton of time. I probably spend on average on a 10-minute video, I probably spend at least 2 to 3 days, because with playing the game and everything.
Right. Yeah.
I spend a lot of time on it. So it starts to be, and then through the way the things have been the last couple of years, I've only had my family to play the games, and it's funny because they're always like, "Can't we play something we know?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I have to work on this."
No, you may not.
Exactly.
That's usually my answer.
And it's funny because she'll play any of the games once, but she may not play it a second time. But,
so looking back at your world in the sci-fi and fandom non-board gaming universe, and now being steeped in sort of the background of the board gaming universe, are there any huge differences in dealing with the fandom on either side? What's the biggest difference between those two spheres?
oh man, the fandom is obviously ginormous on the sci-fi side, but there's still some interesting fandom things happening on the board game side, but it's just a much smaller niche, right? The thing for me personally, though, that's so different is that I spent all those years behind the camera and now I'm in front of the camera. So it's a very different thing. I would go, we would do interviews with the cast or go to set, and my buddy Dan Matson would be interviewing and I would just be shooting behind, while he's interviewing folks, or at conventions, or just shooting product photography for the related fandom thing, or Star Wars, Star Trek typically is what it was. Also, though, because of the magazine, my first reviews that I ever did was for the magazine in like 87, 89, somewhere in there, where we were reviewing for the Lucasfilm fan club all the LucasArts games. So they sent me this giant box of all the LucasArts games, and we went through them slowly to play and review them for the magazine. It was a blast. It was
wow.
Yeah.
So these were the LucasArts video games.
Yes.
So you're playing them on PC. This wasn't like the console stuff?
It was all PC. Yep, back then.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so Mark, you go to sci-fi conventions occasionally, right? Or you have had.
Oh, yeah. It's still, yep.
What's the biggest difference between them and board games? Obviously not the whole, I know board games are played at board game conventions, but how does the vibe feel?
The vibe, what's interesting is that Gen Con has a very similar vibe to some of the bigger sci-fi conventions, because it's that media circus, so to say. It's just like so much it's just so much overload on senses. Everything you see or do or want to look at, it has that same thing going on at Gen Con as like a Star Wars convention or a Star Trek convention. But I would say that for those conventions, folks are in line to hear like, oh, when is this movie going to release, or see a movie trailer. So there's that whole different like media aspect about what they're going to look at instead of a physical board game, right? They're actually just watching clips of something. Or I would say also that meeting cast members and getting signatures is way obviously huge in Star Trek, Star Wars world, all Battlestar Galactica, all those different fandoms. And there's probably some of that still in the board game world, but not like it is there. It's just huge. And one of the first things I ever signed for the magazine was I got a letter from I think a 8 or 9 year old kid who was so excited about photography, and I was asking me all these questions. So I responded to him in another letter. I sent him like multiple issues signed, and it was just one of the coolest things. And then later I'd run into him, to his family at a convention, was really neat. So those are the interesting things about how that worked. But for me, again, being behind the camera versus in front that's the biggest switch for me. And there was a local convention in Denver. It was a 30+ year convention. This last year was their very last one. They were retiring and so forth. So I got to go and do a talk about how, I'd been there since, I think the first time I went was in 85. So, I went from this progression of a fan at the convention to working it for the magazine to now they're having me there as a guest. So it's such a weird transition from all those years. And it's because of that convention specifically that I got to be friends with Peter Macon. We were hanging out. He's from the Orville. He plays Bortus.
Yeah.
So we got to hang out a bunch at one of those, at 2 conventions ago. And so we got to know each other that way. And he eventually invited me out to set. And so I was out doing some stuff with Becca Scott. And while I was there, I got to go hang out on set all day on the Orville and hang out with all the main cast members. So yeah, I have this weird right place, right time thing that happens a lot.
That's amazing. Has there been anybody that you worked with in your sci-fi world that you've later discovered are board gamers? Anybody hiding that secret in the shadows?
Not specifically hiding it. It's interesting because even like the cast members that I talk to now versus then, we didn't really talk about gaming, right? It wasn't a thing. We're talking about the movies or their role in the show. And so I didn't even think, oh, do you play games? But it's now when I see them again at conventions, they're like, oh, and a lot of them are still like, oh, you mean like Monopoly? No, that's not what I mean. But no, like closet gamer, I would say. But there are enthusiasts who are like, oh, yeah, I know this and this. How about Axis and Allies? Yeah, I played that a long time ago. Things like that, come up. But no, I wouldn't say like I haven't run into anybody that's a closet gamer, but I have had like my buddy Eddie McClintock.
You make it sound so terrible. I don't like the word closet gamer.
Well, okay, sorry.
Unless you store your games in the closet, that could be where you put them.
They're not hiding it, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But like Eddie from Warehouse 13, he is not a gamer, and so I got to play the Warehouse 13 game with him, and him and I teamed up on a character, and he's like, "What do you think? Should we do this?" And I go, "No, let's do this." So it was real fun. Moment just to, because he's a real non-gamer for sure. So I tried to get him to play some other things like Liar's Dice, something that would be easier for an actor. You would think Liar's Dice would be the ultimate.
Yeah.
So he likes those lighter games for sure. But yeah, it's just it's interesting jumping into a game like that and playing with one of the cast members. Again, I'm not sure how all that happens, but it does happen to me.
Excellent. Well, I think it's time to move on to our big question for the episode. And this is delving back into your expertise as one of the behind-the-scenes pre-production people for a crowdfunding campaign. And my the discussion question is, what are 3 things that people who are producing crowdfunding campaigns need to have figured out before they hit launch on their project? Because sometimes they hit launch and people start asking questions as part of the campaign. And if you don't have answers ready, people can lose confidence in a campaign right away. Yeah. And so in your experience, what are things that people need to have figured out before they hit that button?
One of the first things I ask folks when I meet with them about a game is I say, well, what have you been doing up to this point to get the word out? And do you have a page on BGG? And if they don't have a page on BGG, I typically will turn the game down, because to me that says they don't understand their audience. So I mean, that's like one of the first things I try to find out when I meet with folks that especially new, like, oh, this is my first game or whatever. Just do they understand the space they're moving into, right? It's an interesting aspect how some people, not everybody obviously, just doesn't understand the space. Or they'll have like a roll and move game, and I'm like, really? And not that those are all bad or anything. It's just, it's pretty basic at times. And I try
Let's
to
be honest, they're mostly bad. Let's not pretend.
All right. Well, not everybody thinks they're bad, but Anyway.
Is it that you think, is it a high percentage of people that you're dealing with that seem to be outside of the hobby sphere, and they're just like, I really have a great game and I want to produce it, and I heard you can help me?
I wouldn't say it's a huge number, but I would say 20 to 25% sometimes, in that range, depending on year to year. It's been varied greatly, especially over the last couple. It's been even more so. I would say people are home doing stuff, right? So they make a game or whatever, and I try to really pin them down on certain things about understanding the audience when I call and have that initial call with them, just to see more about their game. And one of my favorite things in general to ask is like, so what about your game makes you most excited? And if they hem and haw and they can't really answer, that's a red flag for me.
If you can't get enthused about your game,
yes.
How do you expect the audience or you personally to do so?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I think understanding the audience is a huge, first thing for sure. And then from there, I think because I came from a 20-year marketing world, I was at a company called Wirestone, RGB Studio and Wirestone, and we were, digital marketing company. So seeing how folks in the board game world market things is interesting. And I feel like, there's that whole push about, hey, if we don't fund in the first 48 hours, then we're not going to make it, or that's the most critical part. And I always want to say, well, if that's true, why is your campaign longer than 3 days? So the folks that I've seen in the industry really get it are like Ivy Studio. Their very first game, Moonrakers, they literally spent a year marketing the game at conventions, talking about it everywhere they could, and then they jump into their campaign, and they don't just rely on the first couple days. Almost every single day of their campaign, they're pushing new content, new video. They're talking about new things. They're doing live streams, interacting with the community as a whole, answering questions, always on the ball to respond to people when they jump in. So coming from a marketing world, that's how you run a campaign. So leading into that, I see a lot of folks who will maybe have me do a video and then no other content related. I'm like, well, you got to do more marketing than just a single video. So there's a lot that goes into it. And obviously it's time and money, but if you do it right, it pays off. I mean, you need to be upfront in people's face about, hey, don't forget about my game. We have 30 days to fund, but check out this new thing that I just did. You're day 20 and you're still showing new things to people. And Ivy Studio just gets it. Of course, they came from a marketing background as well. Their main company was that. So I wish more board game companies would do that. And there's obviously exceptions, some folks who could fund on day one and blow it out of the gate, right? But in
there's
general,
sort of a hope that you hit go and you fund, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Exactly. And I know campaigns where they're slow to respond to people just in general comments. I mean, you gotta foster that community, right? So, and then the other thing that I've seen and run into is that folks, especially new folks, don't understand the whole fulfillment, how that's going to work, and the cost of that, as well as shipping costs, and especially the last couple of years, shipping costs. So that really hurts like a newcomer to the space for sure, if you don't know that. So. But I still think the number one thing is just marketing. There just needs to be more of it. You just don't rely on the first week or first 3 days. Come on, you've got a 20-day campaign. Be active the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to do, though. I mean, I give them that.
Time and money, yeah.
No, it's not just hard to do. It's hard to do and keep being active about the game, because there's only so much you can say about it unless you're going to add fake stretch goals and things like that.
Well, but if you looked at Ivy Studio, right, they had new content they were showing almost daily, weekly, always something new about the game. They would go and just do a Q&A maybe one day or whatever. So all kinds of things like that really played into fostering the community and getting the word out about their game. And not only that, but they were all over the place beforehand, like well before. Like there's campaigns that come up and they're planning their campaign in like 3 months. And they haven't really fostered a community yet, right? Or they're like, oh, we got a newsletter, we sent it out, we've got like 2,000 people responded, I'm sure we'll do well. No, that doesn't it doesn't mean anything. So
see, I'm not 100% sure on this one, Mark. I know that you need to you don't need to foster community to sell a new product.
It just seems like it in the board
like if someone
game
says
space
they're going to start selling a vacuum cleaner, I'm like, first you need to foster a community.
No, it's definitely different, because the games are so vastly different from one another. It's not like, oh, vacuum cleaner is going to clean my room, or vacuum up all this dirt. There's so much that goes into what makes each game different and how they play and what kind of folks will respond to that type of game. And
I agree that works, but I don't care about any of that. I want to know, is it a good game? I don't care if you spend time having a great community. I want to know, is your game good? As a business, I want your game to be good. As a consumer, I don't care if you have the best Discord group in the world. I want your game to be good.
Yeah, and that also plays into knowing your audience and what type of game you created and put out there. You need to be very aware of what the other games that are like yours or something you're doing in your game, worker placement or whatever it is, you need to understand what all that is.
No. So that I agree. To explain the game, to talk about it, and getting people invested in you is a good idea. I mean, I definitely agree on that. I just don't know that you need to have something new every day of the campaign, because get a good rule book. That's all I care about. Get a good rule book. Put your actual funding goal out there, and realize that no one cares if you were funded in 17 minutes. All right? Not once in my life have I walked in the store and said, this game was funded in 17 minutes? Well, then I need to buy it.
That's such a weird marketing part of it. I'm like, why does that matter? I just don't get that. It's funded in 12 minutes or funded in 30 minutes. It just, so what? I don't understand. So the marketing world that I came from, we did big campaigns for like HP and Microsoft, and we did Jim Beam and Motorola, and all those campaigns that I worked on, they literally had something different every day they were talking about. And I realize it's not board games, but that's what I understand and where I came from in the marketing world. So it's so, board game marketing is so different. It's so weird how most folks just rely on day one. Oh, well, we didn't fund, so I don't know, we might pull the campaign.
I've always found that super weird when a game, will pull its campaign after the first couple days.
Yes.
Like, this is not going the way we wanted, we're pulling it. And it makes me think there's something larger. Usually they do some retooling and come back. But it just always seems surprising. I'll back a project every once in a while, and then I'm disappointed to find out 3 days later that the project doesn't exist anymore.
I almost won't fund a second time. I'm sorry. Get your ducks right first.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it actually has to do with the fact that they have a number on the page that they want to hit, but the real number is something much higher, and it's not trending towards their much higher number. So
that's the thing, Eric. We have this community. The Kickstarter is in a constant change, in a constant flux. And if I go back in time and slap the person who invented stretch goals and, whatever else, all these things, because people expect that now. You're expected to have new stuff, boxes full of garbage, to the point where people were talking about, CMON is currently funding War of Arrakis on Kickstarter. And I don't remember what it's making. It's making like $500,000.
Yeah.
Peanuts,
that's low
apparently.
For them.
No, but that's because what it is if you go there, you back the game. It has 7,500 backers. It's almost at $800,000, but it's not in the millions. And you know why? Because there's not hundreds of dollars of extra things to add on.
Exactly.
And that's okay. This whole concept of you have to have 1 million things in your Kickstarter. No. We just want a good game. Make it pretty. But you know what? When that game comes and I have to shake out the box of all the extra Kickstarter upgrades and 57 little modules and 23, pictures and a custom embroidered picture of my mother that, I got added on none of that stuff matters. It's the game. Is the game good? I'm sorry. I don't have strong opinions on this at all.
Not at all.
I agree. The game should be good, but I feel like most people care, does it look pretty? Well, I'll back it. I think that's one of the big driving factors, because I know in the past there's been some pretty decent games that don't look super pretty and they just don't fund or do as well. So I think the visual aspect is one of the biggest things that people look at first and then go, oh, click fund, or click back and so forth. So I feel like, is it a good game? It's not the first thing that people look for.
If you're looking at the comments on these campaigns, what do you usually think of as the first question people ask when they jump onto the comment section and ask a question?
Shipping is the number one thing anymore.
Well, that's a modern thing, but yes.
Yeah, that's the current modern thing to ask about is shipping. And stretch goals is another thing. Are you going to add more? I see that a lot. In the comments and so forth. So those are definitely
we live in such an age of greed in a sense. Like, I want 1 million miniatures with this game. Are you ever going to use them, sir? No, but I want them. And if I don't get them, this game is garbage. And then when I go to conventions, no one pulls those games off the shelf. They pull off good games.
Because they're too complicated.
Yes, good games. Good games.
I think I usually see, is there solo play?
Right.
But yeah, I think it is this EU friendly shipping. It's usually, somewhere outside the region where the game is being produced and asking how you're going to get it there. And I think that's one of the questions that you need to have a plan for, because often there's, is this EU friendly was often the question. And people would be like, maybe. And that's not good if you haven't figured out at least an attempt at
Eric,
that.
no.
No?
That's a very complex question.
It is.
Sure.
Straight up. And that is not a quick maybe is an actual answer for that. Because your shipping company can change. Anything can change. Yeah. I'm sorry, but the whole shipping thing is out of most companies' hands and in the hands of shippers. And this
But
whole
you should at least have an idea of how you're going to fulfill, though. It shouldn't just be this like, I don't know, we'll figure it out.
I agree on that, Mark. I agree on that. I'm just saying it's a whole lot tougher than people think.
Yeah.
I never said it was easy.
Right.
But yes.
What you touched on, Eric, though, I see a lot of as well. There's that whole, is there a solo mode? That happens a lot in the comments. I see that. And even in like comments on videos, on previews that I've done, that's one of the big comments. Is there a solo mode? Because I don't talk about it or something in the video. It's definitely a frequently asked question. So.
And then the question is, do they add it and cram it in?
And does it feel added on, right? And it a lot of times can, of course, feel that way. Not always, but yeah.
Well, speaking of questions, Mark, we have some questions for you. Okay. And I'm sorry, these are deep questions, and I expect some agonizing, soul-searching over them. First is Zach, who
should start with Zach,
who properly grammaticized his sentence by saying, "Have you used Lego, no S, Lego to upgrade a board game?"
Frequently.
Really?
I've used it in all kinds of situations. So I have a lot of Star Wars Legos. So I'll use it for Star Wars games and so forth sometimes. But usually it's like something fantasy related. It can be like a terrain thing. It could be actually used like HeroScape and Legos combined for like a D&D adventure I was playing with my friends. So I've done a ton of that. I use actually in HeroScape along with Legos is something that I frequently go back to because of all the terrain we use for a lot of different things.
I think that HeroScape terrain is quite expensive to get, and it's still got to be cheaper than Lego.
It depends. There's the thing that I got real fortunate because when I did work for Caffeine.tv, I had a sponsorship with Lego, and I got a bunch of really
Mark
nice
worked solely for Lego bricks.
That was it.
That was one of the big things. That was a huge plus to doing that live stuff for them. And it even was so cool that they brought me out to California and I got to film and do stuff on the Fox lot. So, but then Caffeine kind of turned into this esports mostly streaming network. So, yeah. But anyway, that was a really fun time because they got me the Millennium Falcon, right? And I got to build it on a live stream over the course of 2 weeks during a holiday during Christmas time. So, and I had a bunch of guests come in and rotate through as we were building it and things. So that was really fun.
And now you use that for your X-Wing games.
Yeah, I use that for all my X-Wings games. But yeah, I frequently, especially the little meeples, will use them sometimes as miniatures in a game that doesn't have it or whatever, just for visual aspects on the board. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'll just grab some Legos. I do that a lot.
I had meant to ask you earlier, Mark, what takes up more space in your house, your Lego collection or your board game collection?
Oh, man. I have several sets that aren't built yet, so it's hard to determine, actually. I think board games still outweigh the Legos. But yeah, I'm like the basement down here where my studio is. There's Legos everywhere and board games everywhere. So it definitely consumes the basement. And now in our dining room area, we've got shelves for games, but we also have Legos on top of those. So,
all right, Mark, I have an honest question for you since you're an addict. I've never understood Lego collectors. Maybe you can explain something to me. So I love Lego bricks.
Sure.
I think they're fantastic. When I was a kid, we couldn't afford any of these sets. We got like 2 small Lego dungeon sets and then a gazillion of the box of Legos. We built everything under the sun. But when you buy a Lego Millennium Falcon, for example, you use that to build a Millennium Falcon. When you're done, you have a Lego Millennium Falcon. Then what do? You let it sit there, right? You display it.
Well, it depends on the set. Like the giant Falcon that I have, I would never tear that apart now. But other sets I've rebuilt a couple times here and there just because I find it super cathartic. I'm having like a stressful week or something. I just need an hour to sit and do something mechanical or mindless, so to say. I will tear stuff apart and rebuild. But I have several sets.
But you never use that stuff to build something else.
No, well, I do have bricks specifically for that. So I
do you
will
let children play with the Lego things when you're done with them?
Depends.
That was
I
a
don't.
no.
No.
That was a no. So they're not better than board games. Board games you can play over and over and over.
This is true. But you could do that with Legos. You could tear them apart and build them over and
The
over and
same
over.
one. When I play a board game, it's different
same
each time, I hope.
Well, that's not always true.
This is Mark didn't know it was
Let's
coming on
move on
60
to,
minutes here.
That's right.
Exactly.
love
Let's
it.
move on to Joshua's question. Joshua asks, what crowdfunding project didn't fund but you think it should have?
Oh man, let's see. That's a great question.
Maybe pulled the plug early or
Yeah.
just never got the momentum it should
Oh, I
have.
know a way to check that. I couldn't think of a way to check this. I'm going to go look at
Yeah.
projects I backed that didn't fund, because it
Right.
can't
I
be.
was gonna do the same thing actually.
It can't
I'm trying
be
to
many.
remember.
Because most of the projects you back because they're funding.
Right.
All right, here we go. Let's
Sure,
see.
some people wait to find out that they are funded and knowing it's actually going to happen as opposed to
Well,
a question mark.
Pathfinder Revolution was canceled by Steve Jackson Games.
Yes.
I was disappointed with that. I love the game Revolution
Right.
from Steve Jackson with the Pathfinder thing.
That was the blind bidding game? I remember
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
And you like
Oh, yes.
Pathfinder.
I like
Vabank. Flicking Finches. I don't even know what this one was.
I don't.
Oh, it was a
remember that at all.
dexterity game where you would. This was from. Was this Chris Cormier? No, Doug Bass. Flicking Finches should have. It was a flicking
Nice.
game of
Well,
finches.
I had one that we played at a convention. I want to say it was 2017, maybe. It was obviously just prototype at the time. It was called 0 Hour Cyberspace and used these giant 30-sided dice or something. And it was just a ton of fun. It was so fun. In fact, we played it multiple times. And we got so loud they had to come over and ask us to keep it down because the other gamers were. And we had so much fun. And all my friends, we backed it, and it just didn't fund. But there's been others, I'm sure. That's just the one that comes to mind. But just because we had so much fun at the convention with that one, I was really disappointed when it didn't catch steam and fund. So, yeah.
There was a Chip Beauvais design that was a slot machine deck building game that just recently hit, and it got pulled. They canceled the project. It was one of those that it looked like it was going to fund and then just didn't get the momentum they were looking for, and it got canceled. And I was very disappointed because it looked
What's
like
it
a really
called?
fun game.
Because I'm all in for a slot machine deck building game.
That sounds
Oh
fun.
boy, I'd have to look at my own Kickstarter.
What about a deck building game where you have 3 different decks and you're building all 3 simultaneously?
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I would play that.
Okay.
Back projects.
Question 3, Mark.
Yes.
What is this is from Eric, but not our Eric. This is Eric with a K, but not where you think. What is the oddest thing you have seen as part of a board game Kickstarter?
The oddest game I've seen, I can't remember the title exactly. Maybe it was just Mosquito. It's something around mosquitoes in general, but it was about, it was a card game, a little quirky. Not that it was a bad odd, but it was just this little quirky game. And I had Corey Thompson from Dice Tower Now. He tried to help me figure out the rules because they were a little rough. But we, what was so weird about it is that you have beachgoers and you have to land on them and suck their blood.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a very odd little game, but not that it was bad. It was just quirky for sure. Very strange. But that's probably the oddest of the at least previews that I've done. Anything beyond that one just always stands out to me as like, wow, that's a different game.
No odd stretch goals that came out of the blue. You're like, well, that is not something anyone's tried before.
No, I haven't. None of that really resonates with me because I just expect all kinds of stretch goals to happen nowadays.
Yeah.
You know? So who knows? You can get your own picture in a game or whatever, you know. So,
Right.
Things like that happen all
I
the
just
time.
got some tea with a game, so that was cool.
Just included
Yeah,
in the
that's
box
cool.
or as like an extra?
It was just an extra thing. It was actually better than the game, the tea.
I've had like candy arrive with a game.
Jackpot Payout was the name of the game.
Oh yes, I did see that.
Well, I want this game now. Are
Well,
they going to relaunch
I did
it?
too. It didn't actually happen. I don't know. I haven't seen a relaunch.
Man, this is exciting. Jackpot Payout, a card game inspired by the wild swings of, the page changed, so I don't know what it said, by fate of slot machines. It's designed by Chip
Bouvet.
Bouvet. His first name seems like it came from a casino.
We've met him at TotalCon. He designed Chroma Cubes, which was another one that didn't really see a wide release.
Yeah.
You're right. I remember Chroma Cubes.
I do too. Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been dragging this question out because I've been waiting. So some people asked questions, and then there was so much chat that they got pushed off. So far,
They disappeared.
we only have the question of what's the scariest creature that chased you in one of your walks, which is kind of a dumb question. So not that all questions are dumb, but this one's dumb. But I'll say, what's the strangest thing that happened to you on one of your walks, Mark? Or did you ever have a scary moment where you like saw a mountain lion?
I have not seen like any actual weird creatures like a mountain lion or anything, but one of the most fun or interesting moments was I'm in the middle of filming and some guy just stops to talk to me about it, which happens frequently. But this guy got so excited about board games that he went, and I saw him later at the Haunted Game Cafe, and he was totally getting into it. And so I hooked him up with like Star Realms or something, and he just was blown away. So I haven't had anybody react quite like he did. I didn't know games like this existed. It was just so fun. But I've not run into any I've seen numerous snakes on the trail, real ones. No, some big snakes, but not like rattlesnakes, nothing like that. Some big bull snakes, and you just go, oh, it's a snake.
Did it actually interrupt your video filming?
It did. I almost stepped on it. I'm like, whoa.
You got to pay attention to where you're going, Mark.
I have to. And then I see deer all the time because we have some really nice trails in town, and then the foothills are like right here. So I can go up and hike trails pretty quickly. So I see a lot of deer, and especially the little nature areas and trails we have in town. They're like right there. I'm like, oh, and I almost run into them sometimes. But they're just, and we have turkey as well, so I run into turkeys frequently. But that's really about the three main. I haven't seen there's been rumors of like bears, and like one of the trails I was on had a sign, like in 2020 had a sign up that said a mountain lion had been spotted in the area. So I think I even used that sign in the video, in my walking video, and said, I hope it's safe or something.
It becomes a game in itself. Does Mark
does.
survive the walk?
Did I survive the walk? But nothing like disastrous has ever happened or anything like that. But I do get people always stopping and asking me, what are you doing?
Yeah. Tell them none of their business.
Yeah, none of your business.
Back off. I'm filming. So I don't know if you managed to grab it, Tom, but there was a question that scrolled by a while ago asking about how often you end up keeping the prototypes that you work on.
That was the question I was about to put up. Someone asked how you get rid of the prototypes.
That's a great one.
There you
So some of the things, if folks don't want them back, which we ship them back frequently. If they don't, though, I have a couple options. Either I keep it because I really liked it, or I will donate it to like the Haunted Game Cafe, their library, or I've even gone and donated games to like Children's Hospital. So I've done a bunch of that with the prototypes as well. So and sometimes I'll take, sadly, recycle it just because whatever. But the parts, I usually keep a bag of parts to use and whatever, So I do keep that kind of stuff, dice and little meeples, all kinds of things like that. So, but I do have games that I've kept. What was it? Eldervale? Is that not can't think of the name. Anyway, there's been big games where I didn't get like a final copy of the game, but I still have the prototype and we play it occasionally. So
Sure. It does come a point that if, depending on how far back the prototype was, that the published version is obviously a much higher quality product than what you were working with to begin with. And so it's hard to give it away to somebody when it was in such a rough form when you had it.
Yes. So Dwellings Veil to Veil. Yeah, that was the one. So I still have just a prototype and we play it occasionally. But I do prefer getting like the final game.
Did you hear that? Breaking Games, get them off a real copy.
So, but yeah, I really liked that game a lot. So it was really fun.
All right. Any more you want to grab, Tom?
It's game time, Eric.
It's game time. It's time for 1 and 1. We're going to talk about one game that is relatively new and one game that we'd call an older title. And let's do one each to start off this episode. So, Mark, why don't you go first with your newer game that you played recently?
So, when I'm not playing prototypes, because I am Cult of the Future, it seems like all we play is Return to Dark Tower. This was funny because the thing with Dark Tower was that I played it as a kid, but I never owned it. So I had a friend who did. We played it a bunch, and I asked for it. I wanted it so bad, but never got it. And so when this came around, I'm like, I just backed immediately. Everything. Give me everything. And so it arrived, and I'm like, I'll show the family. I doubt they're going to really like it, but we'll play once. And now they just can't get enough.
Yeah. They're
probably more obsessed about it than I am. But we have probably 20 or 30, maybe 30 plus games into it at this point. So I think we're running about 60% on the wins at the moment.
Okay.
So.
Are you playing with the expansion yet?
Oh yeah, we play with all the bits. Yeah. So.
Okay, that was my question, but Eric asked it. So okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I jumped.
Without the expansion, it just feels easier now. I like all the other.
I like all the expansion makes it a little harder, but also makes it a little easier. I think it's kind of a wash.
The companions definitely help, obviously, right? The folks that you can get from the different guilds, but I feel like things ramp up. I don't know, all the different things and how you have to use the influence. So you have another choice to be made through the. I'm not going to upgrade my character. Instead, we're going to use the influence to do this thing. So I feel like there's more interesting choices to be made with the expansion. So.
All right. So for me, my new game that Tom saw me playing at the Dice Tower Retreat is Puzzle Strike 2. This is the new revision of the Puzzle Strike concept, gem combat that sort of relates to that old PlayStation game, Super Puzzle Fighter 2.
Pause here, Eric, for people who are watching the video part of this.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, folks, it's not a kid's game. All right, continue, Eric.
It does sort of look like a kid's
game.
game.
I did a preview for that game. You had the wand? Yeah, you have the wand.
Yeah, and it lights up and everything. It's almost seizure-inducing. You have to be careful with this thing.
Totally.
So it's a gem bashing deck building combat game. You use the cards in your deck to arrange this gem pile. The original Puzzle Strike didn't have different colors of gems. This does, and they show up in a row that's in front of you, and you have to use cards to swap them to sort of cluster colors together, because the more of one color you can get together, the stronger your attack is going to be. And it's got this wacky scepter, which is sort of a King of Tokyo thing. If I'm holding the scepter, I attack everyone, but everyone attacks me. But it's very difficult for me to block gems when I'm holding the scepter, but I get more powerful every turn. So I hang on to it turn after turn until it becomes too many gems coming at me at once, and I pass it off to somebody. And that's a cool decision when I hang on to that and when I give it up. There's also a co-op mode. I really like the gameplay of Puzzle Strike 2. I think it has some end game issues as far as its pace goes. I think it's really designed as a two-player game. You're supposed to knock out somebody when your gem pile fills up, you're out. And in a two-player game, that would be it. There's only one player left. But if there's 3 or 4, you have to do this sort of final round where everybody gets a bunch of gems and they see how many they can send at the scepter as the final boss battle. And that can take a good amount of time as everybody tries to get their last turn in. So I think it slows down significantly. Maybe once everybody knows the game really well, it will get faster. I still really like the gameplay, though. So I'm hanging on to this one for now. Yeah,
this is your Glory to Rome. Straight up. And I'll tell you why. Because when I got Glory to Rome, it had really terrible artwork. And everybody's like, ugh. And I was like, it's really a good game. And people were like, bleh. So they finally remade it as Black Box Edition. This production of this game is so terrible, folks. That box you're looking at is larger than Ticket to Ride. It barely fits on a Kallax shelf. It does, but it's fat and huge. And you're like, oh, is it full of stuff? No. If I'm showing you my phone here, the thickness of all the decks of cards is about 3 times this. And that's it. Then there's a gigantic dollar store wand in there. And then all the art in this game is bad. It's terribly bad. I hate everything about the production of this game.
I'm not as warned off by the art, but I will agree that there is a lot of empty space in that box.
There's a lot of empty
The gems are cool.
Yeah. The gems are cool. Yep.
So I didn't hate Puzzle Strike. I enjoyed it back in the day. But it's hard to get me to the table to play this one. That's how much I dislike this. It is a badly put together project.
Okay. So what did you play that was new, Tom?
I played an overproduced game called Caesar's Empire. Caesar's Empire is, for some reason, this is from the Asterisk and Obelisk universe, which is a very, very beloved universe. I'm not sure Caesar's a beloved character from that universe, but that's what this game's about. Asterisk and Obelisk, I think they show up in a corner of the board, tiny, and that's it. But the game itself is really fun. It is a game in which you are connecting all the cities on the board to Rome. It's very abstract in a sense. As you place these cities out, you're collecting points, and it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. The game it reminds me most of is actually a game Eric likes, which is called Transamerica. As you connect these different routes. It's not quite the same, but it has a similar vibe to me. But it's fun. This is a Ticket to Ride size box with instead of putting roads between things, there's like 3 little miniatures of Roman soldiers. They look really cool, but it's like, that could have been a stick. But so despite all that, I think it scales really well. It plays really fast. It feels like you make some fun, interesting decisions. It's a great filler. It just doesn't look like one. So that's Caesar's Empire. Huh?
It's way overproduced though, just from the miniatures, or what?
Not way overproduced. I'm just saying the fact that is the game is just a map, and you have a bunch of groups of soldiers or roads, right? You connect cities. You keep tokens. That's the whole game. But it's really a big box and everything. And again, I would rather this than the other way, right? But
sure.
But I was surprised. Like when we first got it, I put it on a table, and there was 5 people, and I said, well, 2 of you need to play a different game, because I'm straight up not playing this with 5. It's a Euro game. No way. And we played it with 3 people, and I was like, you 2 can come back now, because this would play with 5 very quickly. That's a rare thing in the Euro game world.
It is. Very.
Cool.
That's my new game.
All right, Mark.
Caesar's Empire.
Let's head back to the past. What have you played that's an older title?
Bonanza. It's a huge, and both the card game and the dice game. It's just in constant rotation. Ever since the kids were little, we've played it. And the thing about Bonanza, right? It's all about collecting and planting the beans and so forth. And the artwork for that game somehow just really resonates with me. And I just happen, because of the artwork, I remember what's been played really well. It's just super visual for me. And my daughter would always accuse me of, well, you're just cheating. I'm like, no, I just happen to remember. So it's always a game. And we got like the 20th anniversary, whatever the anniversary edition is. Yeah. So that's the one we just played recently and so forth. So, but yeah, it's that and the dice one. And the dice, we went through 3 versions of the dice game, and the dice now are all rubbed off at this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it hasn't held up. That's how much it's been played. So
what do you guys think Bonanza
I feel like
came
a new
out?
version.
It's
97?
Yeah, I want to say 90s.
Well, okay. Well, Mark is just couching his bets, but Eric is on the money. 97.
Is he? Nice.
Woo! I think I had to look it up on a couple of top 10 lists.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Oh.
I would have thought.
Good
earlier,
job, Eric.
Yeah.
Good remembering. Speaking of older games, this is one that you used to talk about all the time, Tom, and it was always sort of in the back of my mind as I need to try this someday, and had the opportunity at the Dice Tower Retreat with the wonderful library that have some classic titles on there to pull Clue, the Great Museum Caper, off the shelf.
Oh, we put custom paintings in this one.
There are, which I did not know about. My face is in this box. I did not know that. There's a bunch of 3D printed easels and paintings with Dice Tower personalities in there. So I got to hang myself in the museum. It is a one versus many game. You have one player that's secretly moving around this museum. It's this 3D plastic museum, and they're trying to steal paintings that are hidden around the entire complex. And the other players are trying to find them. And not only are they able to visually scan for the person they're looking for, but they also have security cameras that are placed around the board. And so you roll a die and it gives you your movement, and it tells you what action you can take. And you can trigger the motion sensors in a room where the player has to say, well, I'm in the blue room, or I spend one of my 2 actions to snip the wires on the motion sensors. Or if you get an eyeball, you can say, I'm physically looking. Do I see you? No, yes, no. Or I'm using camera number 4. Can camera number 4 see you? But you can also snip the cameras. You can disable the cameras, but then everybody knows you were in that spot at one point. You can shut off power to the whole grid, but then everybody knows you were in the power room. It's really neat. It's sort of a future or an early version of stuff like Spectre Ops or Stop Thief, the one versus many version of Stop Thief. But it still sort of holds up. It's a solid game, and I'm really glad I pulled it off the shelf. Now I want to find one, and they're probably impossible to get. Clue, the Great Museum Caper. Yeah. I like it.
Well, I'm looking it up online, Eric, and I just found one here. It's almost complete. Hang on. Let's find one. This one, oh, I like it. The one after that says 100% complete on eBay for $40 and $35.
That's not terrible.
And what do you mean not terrible? That's pretty good for how big that is.
Pretty good.
Here's a $25 one.
It's a big box, right? I haven't played. It's been a long time since I played it. When did it come out?
91.
91. Yeah. Wow.
All right, quick do an old game I just played called Vabank. Although the cover I'm showing you here, folks, is like last year. But the Vabank came out much earlier than that. When did Vabank come out? I'm going to say that was 99. I'm probably playing the the latest of all these. 2001. Doesn't matter. It's 21 years old. Anyway, this is a game where you bet, bluff, raise the stakes, and cheat at a casino. Each turn, you throw chips on tables. You move pieces around these tables. You play cards secretly down, and then you try to out-bluff everyone else. It's very simple. Plays up to 6 players. I just played at the retreat with Dan Hughes, who at the very end slightly smiled and said he liked it, which I think was love. I'm not sure.
It's a huge reaction.
It was funny because the whole convention I played Ready, Set, Bet with everybody, which is a crazy yelling game. And Dan played, and he said nothing. Like, I'm rolling the horse. Everyone's like, 7! And he sat there stoically. I now know what the word stoic means. Anyhow, that's back to where I'm at. Vabank. Lots of fun.
Excellent. Well, Mark, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, this is great.
Where, if people want to find out what you're up to, your latest projects, where's the best place to figure that out?
So on Twitter, it's Board Game Corner, and on Facebook, find me there. But I usually, at least weekly, post all the Kickstarter previews that I did on Twitter, and off and on Facebook, I usually will put them in the different channels for people to see. So. But yeah, those are the main places. I'm on Instagram as well. BG Corner on Instagram. So
nice.
Streed.
Yeah.
He's also on the Dice Tower channel a lot. All right.
Yes.
So thank you, everybody. Hang on, I lost my script. Thank you, guest Mark Streed, for coming on today's show due to my asking. Until the next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
And I am Eric Summerer.
We will see you soon at the table.
Oh, boy. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again in 4 weeks as we take a break for the Essen Fair. But we'll be back on October 17th to hear all about how much currywurst Tom ate. At the Table is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Roy Kennedy, Wendy Yee, and Chris Yee. Internet abuse towards a certain cheese company brought to you by Flamecraft. And support for everything at the Dice Tower comes from viewers and listeners like you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter or to Tom at Dicetower.com or Eric at Dicetower.com. Until we see you again from all of us at the table, have fun
gaming. Also, craft is not cheese.